Sarah wiped the grease off her hands as she knelt beside the smoking car on the highway, not knowing that the stranger she was about to help was actually her blind date, and this unexpected meeting would change everything she thought she knew about taking chances on love again after years of struggling alone as a single mother working 3 jobs just to keep her daughter fed. But what happened next when he realized who she was would leave both of them speechless and questioning whether fate had just handed them the greatest gift or the cruelest joke. Sarah Mitchell had been driving home from her second job at the diner when she spotted the luxury sedan pulled over on the side of Highway 42 with its hood up and smoke billowing from the engine. It was already past 9 in the evening, and the November air was crisp and cold, but something in her refused to just drive past someone in trouble, even though she was exhausted from working since 6 that morning and still had to pick up her 7-year-old daughter Emma from her mother's house before heading to her third job cleaning offices downtown. Pulled her old pickup truck behind the stranded vehicle and grabbed the toolbox she always kept in the back, a habit she had learned from her late father, who had taught her everything about fixing cars before he passed away. When she was just 16 years old, as she approached the sedan, she could see a man in an expensive suit pacing back and forth while talking frantically on his phone, his polished shoes clicking against the asphalt with each anxious step. "Excuse me," she called out, startling him. "Do you need some help, though?" Man turned around, and Sarah immediately noticed his striking features, sharp jawline, dark hair slightly messy from running his hands through it in frustration, and eyes that held a mixture of stress and relief. When he saw her, he quickly ended his phone call and walked toward her with a grateful expression that seemed almost comical given how out of place he looked on this deserted highway. "Thank God, yes. I have no idea what happened," he said, gesturing helplessly at his car. 1 minute everything was fine, and the next smoke started pouring out, and now it won't start at all. I have somewhere really important to be, and I've been stuck here for 20 minutes. Sarah nodded and walked past him to examine the engine without waiting for permission. She had seen this scenario play out dozens of times in her life. People who drove expensive cars but had no clue what was under the hood. She leaned over the engine bay, immediately spotting the problem as steam continued to rise into the cold night air. "Radiator hose burst," she explained, pointing to the split rubber tube. "That's why." "You overheated? Do you have any water in your car?" The man shook his head, looking embarrassed. "I don't think so." Sarah walked back to her truck and returned with a gallon of water and some duct tape, tools of the trade for someone who had spent years keeping old vehicles running on a shoestring budget. She worked quickly wrapping the damaged hose tightly with the tape, knowing it was only a temporary fix, but it would get him where he needed to go. "This should hold long enough for you to get to a gas station," she said as she poured water into the radiator, "but you'll need to get this replaced properly tomorrow. Don't push the car too hard and keep an eye on the temperature gauge." Man watched her work with obvious admiration, his earlier panic fading into something else, gratitude mixed with curiosity. He seemed fascinated by how confidently she handled the repair, her movements practiced and efficient despite the cold and the darkness. "I can't thank you enough," he said as she closed the hood. "How much do I owe you for this?" "Nothing," Sarah replied, wiping her hands on an old rag. "Just pay it forward next time you see someone who needs help." He pulled out his wallet anyway, and Sarah noticed it was thick with bills, but she shook her head firmly. She hadn't stopped to help him for money. She had stopped because it was the right thing to do, and because she knew what it felt like to be stranded and helpless when her own car had broken down 3 years ago with Emma crying in the backseat and no one willing to stop. "At least let me know your name," he insisted. "I'm Michael, by the way, Michael Chen." Sarah she answered simply, then glanced at her watch and felt her stomach drop. She was already running late. "I really have to go. My daughter is waiting." "Wait," Michael said, reaching into his car and pulling out a business card. "If you ever need anything, please call me." "I mean it. You really saved me tonight." Sarah took the card more out of politeness than any real intention of using it and stuffed it into her jacket pocket. Then she climbed back into her truck and drove away, leaving Michael standing by his repaired car, watching her taillights disappear into the darkness. She didn't think much about the encounter as she sped toward her mother's house, her mind already shifting to the next task on her endless list of responsibilities. When she arrived, her mother Helen was waiting at the door with Emma, already in her pajamas and clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Sarah felt a pang of guilt seeing her daughter's tired eyes, knowing that Emma spent more time with her grandmother than with her these days. But what choice did she have? The bills didn't pay themselves, and being a single mother meant making sacrifices. That cut deep into her heart. Every single day, Mommy, Emma squealed, running into Sarah's arms. "Hey, baby," Sarah whispered, holding her tight. "Did you have fun with Grandma today, Emma?" Nodded enthusiastically, launching into a detailed story about the cookies they had baked and the cartoons they had watched, while Sarah listened and smiled, even as exhaustion pulled at every muscle in her body. Helen handed her a container of leftovers with that worried look. She always wore, the one that said she wished Sarah would slow down and accept more help. But Sarah had learned long ago that depending on others only led to disappointment. Sarah drove Emma home in the truck with the heater barely working and the radio playing softly. She thought about the man she had helped, Michael Chen, with his expensive suit and fancy car, living in a world so different from hers that they might as well have been on separate planets. She wondered briefly what important place he had been rushing to before pushing the thought away. It didn't matter. Their paths had crossed for 10 minutes, and now they would never see each other again. But fate, as Sarah would soon discover, had very different plans. 2 days later, on a Friday evening, Sarah was getting ready for something she had sworn she would never do again: a blind date. Her best friend Kelly had been pestering her for months to try online dating, insisting that Sarah deserved happiness and companionship, and that being a single mother didn't mean she had to be alone forever. Kelly had even gone so far as to create a dating profile for Sarah without permission, and had been screening potential matches until she found someone she deemed worthy. "His name is David," Kelly had said excitedly. "Hayes successful, kind, loves kids," and he specifically said Hayes looking for something real, not just a fling. Sarah had reluctantly agreed to one date, partly because Kelly would never let it go, and partly because some small part of her wondered if maybe Kelly was right. Maybe it was time to take a chance. Maybe there was someone out there who would understand her life and love Emma as much as she did now. As she stood in front of her closet trying to find something presentable to wear that wasn't stained with grease or smelling like diner food, she felt her anxiety rising. What was she even doing? She hadn't been on a date in 5 years, not since Emma's father had walked out when Emma was just 6 months old, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility of fatherhood. She finally settled on a simple blue dress that Kelly had bought her for Christmas, and did her best with makeup, though her hands were rough from work and no amount of lotion could completely hide it. Emma was spending the night at Helen's again, and Sarah tried not to feel guilty about it as she kissed her daughter goodbye and promised to tell her all about it tomorrow. The restaurant Kelly had chosen was nicer than anywhere Sarah usually went, a place with cloth napkins and a wine list and prices that made her wince when she looked at the menu online. She arrived 10 minutes early, her nerves making her hands shake slightly as she parked her truck between 2 shiny SUVs. Skelly had shown her a photo of David, a professional. Sarah had learned that the hard way. She took a deep breath and walked inside, giving the hostess the reservation name and being led to a table near the window where she sat down and waited. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Sarah checked her phone repeatedly, wondering if she had gotten the time wrong or if David had changed his mind. The hostess kept glancing at her with poorly concealed pity, and Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment. This was exactly why she didn't date. Exactly why she had told
Kelly this was a bad idea.
She was about to leave when she saw someone rushing through the restaurant entrance, a tall figure in a suit, looking flustered and apologetic, and when he turned toward her table, Sarah's heart stopped. It was Michael, the man from the highway, the one whose car she had fixed 2 nights ago. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and Sarah's mind went blank with shock. She watched as recognition flickered across his face, then confusion, then something that looked almost like disbelief. He walked toward her slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "Sarah," he said, her name coming out as a question. "Are you David?" "No," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, are you David?" He shook his head. Michael, but I was supposed to meet someone named Sarah for a blind date. My friend set it up." He pulled out his phone and showed her the messages, and Sarah did the same, and they both realized at the exact same moment what had happened there. Friends had used their middle names on the dating profile Michael David Chen and Sarah Louise Mitchell to give them privacy, and neither of them had known they had already met until this very moment. "This is impossible," Michael said, sitting down across from her, looking as stunned as she felt. Sarah left a sound that was half shock and half something else. "What are the odds?" Michael shook his head slowly, still staring at her as if she might disappear. "I almost didn't come tonight," he admitted. "I was going to cancel because I kept thinking about you, about the woman who stopped to help me when no one else. What I couldn't stop wondering who you were and if I'd ever see you again." Sarah felt her heart do something strange in her chest, a flutter she hadn't felt in years. "I didn't think to see you again either," she said. Honestly, the waiter appeared to take their order, breaking the surreal moment, and they both ordered almost automatically, still processing the impossibility of the situation. Once the waiter left, an awkward silence fell between them, neither knowing quite how to proceed. "So," Sarah said, "finally you were rushing to this date when your car broke down." Michael nodded, looking sheepish. "Yeah. I was already running late because of a work meeting that went long, and then the car broke down, and I thought I was going to miss it completely." He paused, then added, "I actually called my friend from the highway and told him I was going to have to cancel, and he practically yelled at me to find a way to get there," he said. "Something about this being too important to miss." "Did he know?" Sarah asked. "Did he know it was May?" "Don't think so," Michael said, "but my friend knows your friend Kelly. They work together. That's how they set this up. I think they're going to lose their minds when they find out what happened." Sarah could already imagine Kelly's reaction, the screaming, the claims that this was destiny, that the universe had brought them together twice for a reason, but Sarah wasn't sure she believed in that kind of thing. Life had taught her that the universe was random and often cruel, and that good things didn't just fall into your lap. But here she was, sitting across from a man who had already seen her at her most ordinary, covered in grease, on a dark highway helping a stranger, and he was looking at her now like she was the most interesting person in the world. "Tell me about your daughter," Michael said, leaning forward. "Emma, right?" Sarah blinked in surprise. "You remember her name?" "Remember everything you said," Michael replied, his eyes sincere. "You said you were rushing to pick her up, and I could hear in your voice how much you love her." Something in Sarah softened at that, the fact that he had noticed, the fact that he remembered. Most men ran when they found out she had a child, but Michael was asking about Emma with genuine interest, not polite obligation. "She's 7, Sarah said, and couldn't help the smile that always appeared when she talked about her daughter. "She's smart and funny and loves dinosaurs and space, and she asks about 1,000,000 questions a day." "He sounds amazing," Michael said. "And what about you? What do you do when you're not rescuing strangers on highways?" Sarah hesitated. This was always the hard part, the moment when she had to admit that her life wasn't glamorous or impressive, that she worked 3 jobs just to survive. "I work at a diner and I clean offices," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "and sometimes I do freelance car repairs for people in my neighborhood." Michael didn't look disappointed or judgmental the way she had feared. Instead, he looked thoughtful. "That explains why you knew exactly what to do with my car," he said. "I was completely useless. I have no idea how engines work." Sarah found herself relaxing slightly. "Most people judge me when they find out," she admitted. "They think I should have gone to college or gotten a better job. But life doesn't always work out the way you plan." "Tell me about it," Michael said, with a rueful smile. "I was supposed to be a doctor. My parents had my whole life mapped out, but I hated medical school. I dropped out and started my own business, and they didn't speak to me for 2 years." "Kind of business?" Sarah asked. "Tech consulting," Michael explained, "helping small businesses update their systems and protect their data. It took years to build it up, and there were times I was eating ramen for every meal, but I believed in it." Sarah saw something in him, then a kindred spirit. Someone who had struggled and fought for what they had, someone who understood that success wasn't handed to you on a silver platter. They talked through dinner, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Michael told her about his parents who had eventually come around and now proudly told everyone about their son, the entrepreneur, and Sarah told him about her father who had died when she was young and how she had dropped out of high school to help her mother pay the bills. She told him about Emma's father without bitterness, just stating the facts, that he had left and never looked back, and that she had spent the last 7 years doing everything alone. Michael listened without judgment, asking questions that showed he was really paying attention. Not just waiting for his turn to talk. When dinner ended, neither of them wanted to leave. They stood in the parking lot by Sarah's truck talking for another hour about everything and nothing. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in months. And when Michael reached out and gently touched her hand, she didn't pull away. "I want to see you again," Michael said, his voice serious, "not because my friend set this up, but because I genuinely want to know you better. I want to meet Emma, if you're comfortable with that. I want to see where this goes." Sarah felt fear and hope warring in her chest. She had been burned before, had trusted someone who had promised forever and then disappeared. But she also knew that living in fear meant never taking chances, meant never finding happiness. "It's okay," she said softly. "I want that too." They made plans for the following weekend, something casual at a park where Emma could play and they could talk without pressure. Michael walked Sarah to her truck, and before she got in, he leaned down and kissed her cheek, a gesture so gentle and respectful that it made her heart ache. "Thank you," he whispered, "for fixing my car and for giving me a chance." Sarah drove home that night feeling like she was floating, her mind replaying every moment of the evening. When she got home, she immediately called Kelly, who screamed so loudly that Sarah had to hold the phone away from her. "I knew it." Kelly shouted, "I knew you two would be perfect together. This is fate, Sarah. This is actual fate, maybe," Sarah said. But she was smiling. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and tentative steps forward. Michael came to the park and met Emma. Was initially shy, but quickly warmed up to him, especially when he showed genuine interest in her dinosaur facts. He brought her a book about space and sat patiently while she explained the difference between asteroids and comets. Sarah watched them together and felt something terrifying and wonderful blooming in her chest. Michael started showing up at the diner during Sarah's shifts, ordering coffee and pie and leaving ridiculously large tips that she always tried to refuse. He met her after her cleaning jobs, bringing her coffee and walking her to her truck in the dark. Parking garages. He never made her feel small for her work, never acted like he was better than her. He told her about his childhood as the son of immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities, and Sarah shared her own stories about growing up poor and watching her mother work herself to exhaustion. They discovered they both loved old movies and terrible puns and staying up late watching thunderstorms. One evening, about 2 months after their first date, Michael showed up at Sarah's small apartment with a toolbox. "I heard your truck was making a weird noise," he said with a grin, "and I thought maybe you could teach me how to fix it." Sarah laughed. "You want me to teach you about cars? Well," Michael said, setting the toolbox down, "you taught me that night on the highway that helping people matters. And I want to learn from the best." They spent the evening in the parking lot, with Sarah patiently explaining engine parts. While Michael took notes and asked questions, Emma sat on the curb doing her homework and occasionally shouting questions about whether they could get pizza afterward. It was ordinary and perfect, and Sarah realized with startling clarity that this was what happiness felt like. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but someone showing up, someone wanting to be part of her messy, complicated life. Someone who looked at her daughter with affection and her grease-stained hands with admiration. That night, after Emma was asleep, Michael and Sarah sat on her tiny balcony, drinking cheap wine and looking at the stars. "I need to tell you something," Michael said, his voice serious. Sarah's heart clenched immediately, bracing for bad news. "I love you," he said simply. "I've known for weeks, but I didn't want to scare you off. I love how strong you are and how much you love Emma. I love that you stopped to help a stranger, even when you were exhausted. I love everything about you, and I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm in this for real." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I've been hurt before, and I have Emma to think about. I can't let her get attached to someone who's going to leave him." "Not leaving," Michael said, firmly taking her hands. "I know you have no reason to trust that, but I'm going prove it to you every single day." And he did over the next year. Michael became part of their lives in a way that felt natural and right. He came to Emma's school plays and helped Sarah fix her truck when it broke down again. He took them on weekend trips to the beach and the zoo, and he never once complained about Sarah's work schedule or the chaos of single motherhood. He convinced Sarah to let him help pay for a community college course she had always wanted to take, and he encouraged her to start her own car repair business, something she had dreamed about, but never thought possible with his support and her skills. They slowly built something real. When Michael proposed, it was nothing fancy, just the three of them at the park, where they had first spent time together as a family. He got down on one knee with Emma standing beside him, holding a ring box, and asked Sarah if she would take a chance on forever. Sarah said yes, with tears streaming down her face and Emma jumping up and down with excitement, and she knew that this was what she had been waiting for. Not a perfect life, but a real one, filled with someone who loved her exactly as she was. On their wedding day, Kelly stood as maid of honor and gave a tearful speech about fate and broken radiator hoses and how sometimes the universe did know what it was doing. Michael told the story of how they met twice, and how the second time he had known immediately that Sarah was extraordinary in his vows. He promised to always be there when she needed help, to never take her for granted, and to love Emma as if she were his own. Sarah promised to trust him, to let him in, and to believe that not everyone leaves us. They danced at their reception. Sarah thought back to that cold November night on the highway when she had stopped to help a stranger, never imagining that the smoking car and desperate man would lead to this moment. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering if she would always be alone, if Emma would ever have a father figure, if Sarah herself would ever find someone who understood now. She knew that sometimes taking a chance on helping someone meant helping yourself, that fear could be overcome by courage. And that love didn't always look the way you expected. Sometimes it looked like grease under your fingernails, and a broken-down car, and a stranger who saw past the surface to the extraordinary woman underneath. Sarah leaned her head on Michael's shoulder as they swayed to the music, Emma dancing nearby with her new grandfather, Michael David. Chen and Sarah felt at peace with a fullness in her heart she hadn't known was possible. Best blind date ever, Michael whispered in her ear. Sarah laughed softly. Best broken radiator too. And as they looked out at their friends and family celebrating with them, Sarah realized that her story wasn't about being rescued. It was about the power of kindness, about stopping even when you were tired, about taking chances even when you were scared. It was about two people finding each other against impossible odds and choosing each other every single day. The car that had brought them together was long since traded in, but Sarah kept the old duct tape in a drawer as a reminder, a symbol of how sometimes the simplest acts could change everything, how one moment of compassion could lead to a lifetime of love. Ran up and grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward the cake, and Sarah and Michael followed, laughing, their family complete, their future bright. And Sarah knew with absolute certainty that every hard day, every struggle, every moment of fear had been worth it to get to this moment, because sometimes the date you fear turns out to be the greatest gift you ever receive, and sometimes the stranger on the highway is actually your forever coming to find you when you least expect it, but exactly when you need it most.